Welcome back to Studio Chatter. Our next guest is a well-respected American and church historian, and he's the host of an entertaining podcast, The Standard of Truth. Welcome, Gerrit Dirkmaat, to the Chatter.
Thanks for having me.
Hello, Gerrit. The coolest thing is you're from Spanish Fork.
Well, I live in Spanish Fork. I'm from Idaho originally.
No, you're from here. Like you live here.
I live here, and honestly, we've had a couple of opportunities to move, and I tell my wife we're not moving. We're staying in Spanish Fork. In part because where I live, I know that this isn't everywhere in Spanish Fork, but where I live, there are no mosquitoes at all, and I hate mosquitoes, and so it's great.
Okay.
That is a selling point. That is a selling point.
We had an opportunity to go somewhere else, but
and you know why? Because it's up on the east bench in the wind tunnel.
I'll take
I've
the wind
lived there
if it means
before.
no mosquitoes.
So I met Gerrit a month or so ago because he is featured in this current issue of Utah Valley Magazine as one of the coolest 50 people in the Valley right now, right?
Yeah, I assume that they couldn't find anyone else.
No.
And I was
I happen to
41
know
when they
that's
put me
not
out,
how
but-
that works.
No,
We know this.
no. So
Wow.
let's dive
So
in.
yes, tell
Hear
us about you and what makes this happen.
Well, so like I said, I'm originally from Idaho, and from the time I was a kid, I loved history. I mean, this is probably going to sound like this is about to be the most boring interview ever because when I was a little kid, I read history books from the time I was 12 or 13. I was fascinated by it, and I think it's because my dad was born in Nazi-occupied Holland in the Netherlands, and so his earliest memories were growing up during the war, and he and his family immigrated to the United States right after. So I'm the first generation born in the United States, actually, and so I think I was fascinated by that, and so I studied history, and you know, when you tell your high school guidance counselor that, yeah, I just plan to be a history teacher, and they try not to look disappointed. You're like, oh, but you have straight A's. Did you want to maybe do something that makes money? Well,
one day I'll be a podcaster, and
That's
that'll
exactly
make me
right.
a million.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes.
I'm just gonna. They didn't know I'd be here. I
Right.
want to send a clip of this. My high school guidance counselor. You was so disappointed.
I've
But
arrived.
Anyway. I went to the University of Colorado, is where I got my PhD in American history, and I was studying primarily 19th century foreign relations of the United States. And my dissertation ended up focusing on Latter-day Saints' interactions with the federal government as they're leaving the United States and coming to Mexico, and then that, of course, becomes part of the United States. And so after that, I was hired on by the church history department in Salt Lake City, where I was working on the Joseph Smith Papers project. So I worked on that for 4 years before I was hired to teach church history and doctrine at Brigham Young University. So
That's a huge undertaking.
oh yeah, there's a lot.
That is a lot to go into that. So tell us, like, what caused you to go into the LDS part of that history when you're doing
honestly,
all your stuff?
I when people would ask me, because I grew up as a Latter-day Saint.
Because there's so much history out there,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, I grew up, but I'd really focused on military and diplomatic history because that's what had fascinated me at first, because of my grandfather and my father. And so I'd have people ask me, "Oh, are you going to do Mormon history?" And I'm like, "No, that's already all been done. I'm pretty sure everyone's already got that." I mean, that's what the naive
right.
person says, right?
Yeah.
So, and I was actually studying it for a paper, and now, just so all of your viewers can fall asleep now, it was a paper on the propensity of Southern generals in the Civil War to attack rather than to defend.
Stop it.
Yeah, and so
specific.
it has to be when you're in graduate school. And as I'm going through the records of the rebellion, it has all these different, collection of letters and dispatches from the Civil War, North and South. There was a particular set of letters from someone who said, and if you'll give me, enough troops, I will exterminate these rebel trash. I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty rough even for the Civil War.
Right.
And as I read further, I realized, well, this isn't a Union general occupying Mississippi. This is Patrick Connor, who is the Union commander occupying Utah. And so he viewed Latter-day Saints as traitors, even though they had sent men to fight in the Civil War on the side of the Union. And so he kept trying to get the green light to really open up on them. So that's what started I wrote a paper on that, and then I started to research some more on it. And so eventually I wrote my dissertation on the interactions between the United States government and Latter-day Saints as they're leaving Illinois, as they're going outside of the United States, and and kind of how they interact with one another, and sometimes good and obviously sometimes not. So
Sure. Wow.
What was one of the coolest experiences working on the Joseph Smith papers?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. There were so many, but I mean, there was one point where we were working on early documents, and we have a page of the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon, right there with Oliver Cowdery's handwriting right there in front of you. And, I know it sounds weird, but there is power in these documents. Just, it's one thing to read the transcript of a letter. Mm-hmm. It's quite another to actually have Joseph Smith's letter in front of you and to see his handwriting and to see his really bad spelling and to I mean it's pretty rough, but
I've heard that.
He misspells a lot of things, but it's reflecting his lack of formal education. And there was a lot of power behind that. I went and researched at the Huntington Library in California, and when I was there, I got to they have some of Eliza R. Snow's journals, and it's just a little pocket journal, and I pulled out, it was barely the size of my hand.
Wow.
And honestly, it was an incredibly powerful experience to hold it, because it represented so much sacrifice. It's easy when you talk about religion in kind of the abstract or the broader terms, well, I agree with this or I don't agree with that. But however you view religion, it is a motivating factor for millions, billions of people in the world. And so understanding what makes someone walk 2,000 miles and settle in the middle of a desert where next to a salt lake where you can't really irrigate from that. I mean, there was power in it, and reading her journal. So I mean, I had lots of great experiences. The fragments of the papyrus scrolls that are related to the Book of Abraham, that was an interesting thing to look at, because the scrolls were very brittle. They were falling apart. And so the way they tried to make them stronger is they pasted paper to the back of it. Well, I don't know if they just didn't have a whole lot of paper, or, the historian in me is like, why didn't you just go buy some paper? Because what they decided to use to strengthen the back of it was the original building plans of the Kirtland Temple. So you could so you'll see the papyrus scrolls, and behind it you'll see the lines of where they're drawing the pews from the original Kirtland Temple plan.
It's just like, who has some paper? Here you go.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they must have been like, well, we're already done with this temple. It's not like we're going to build another one.
Wow.
That was a pretty special experience too. But there are lots.
And there's so much controversy around those scrolls now, right?
Yeah, and so part of the problem is the original scrolls don't exist. I mean, there were many of them, and nearly all of them were destroyed in a fire in Chicago, and so we really only have fragments, and that makes it even more,
exciting.
Yeah, it makes it really more troubling. Yeah, it's harder to figure out all the way around. So,
okay,
history.
Let's pause right there. Let's take a short break and come back with more from Professor Dirkmaat. Stay with us.